Before I start my speech, I'd like everyone to know that there is Coke in the lobby, so on your way out, you can just grab one if you'd like to. So, you have a favorite soda? I know I do. Ever since I was a little boy growing up, I've always wanted a cold, refreshing Coke anytime my family and I went out to a restaurant. Here in Georgia, it is easily obtainable at any type of restaurant, but when my family traveled up to my father's home state of North Carolina, most restaurants we went to only served Pepsi products, and I've always disliked Pepsi. I would order a Coke at these Pepsi restaurants, but the server would always ask, "Will Pepsi work?" After the first time I tasted Pepsi, I never wanted another one, and instead would ask for a Sprite. After the waiter at waitress would respond, "This year, Mr. Work." Every time this happened to me, I would always be disappointed, so eventually I just asked for water. People are always comparing the taste of Coke and Pepsi, but I think there's a tremendous difference, and therefore I've chosen for my senior speech topic, the greatest debate in the soda world, Coke versus Pepsi. The beverage Coca-Cola was invented in 1886 by Atlanta pharmacist Dr. John S. Pemberton and named by his bookkeeper Frank Robinson with the trademark name which remains today, Coca-Cola. Pemberton originally meant to use this beverage as a tonic, which Pemberton claimed to cure headaches and was also said to give the consumer a slight buzz. In the original formula, Dr. Pemberton used a form of cocaine from coca leaves, which were not illegal until 1914, but the cocaine was later extracted from the drink in 1903. Dr. Pemberton later sold his beverage to another Atlanta pharmacist, Asa Griggs Candler. Candler founded the Coca-Cola Company and started selling the beverage across the nation, including Canada, with the success of advertising. Pepsi-Cola arrived 7 years later in 1893 in New Bern, North Carolina. Invented by Caleb Bradman in his drugstore, Caleb Bradman named his drink Brad's Drink until 1898 when he renamed it Pepsi-Cola and originally advertised it as a health drink that would help consumer with indigestion. Because of the instant popularity of the drink and the demand for more, Caleb Bradman applied for a trademark with the U.S. Patent Office to officially form his company. After the patent was approved, Bradman dedicated all of his time and energy towards improving the drink and would name his company Pepsi-Cola. In Bradman's first year with the company, he would go on to sell almost 8,000 gallons of syrup and would increase to almost 20,000 gallons of syrup. And Bradman would go on to purchase a new factory and move out of his drugstore. As both drinks moved on in the early 1900s, Coke would continue to be the leading cola, relying on their image to sell more beverages, while Pepsi tried to stay in the cola race by selling their drinks at a lower price, offering more Pepsi in the bottle. In 1923, Pepsi was forced to file for bankruptcy due to the rationing of sugar during World War I. Pepsi tried to use other alternatives for sugar, but these did not satisfy the consumers. In 1928, Pepsi-Cola was sold to Craven Holdings Corp. And its headquarters moved to Virginia. The economic crash in 1929 caused many businesses to go bankrupt, including Pepsi-Cola, which filed bankruptcy once again in 1931 and would be sold again that same year. Coca-Cola would survive the economic crisis by advertising that drinking Coke would make a person's day more refreshing in such dark times. Meanwhile, Pepsi attempted to dig itself out of bankruptcy. Coca-Cola moved on to expand sales in several countries including Australia, South Africa, and Norway. As the 1940s came, so did World War II, which would increase the advertising for both companies, with each claiming they served the soldiers by giving them energy from their drinks. During the war, Coca-Cola first introduced their name as just Coke, which seemed to catch on. Pepsi, on the other hand, began selling its beverage in a can and changed their logo to red, white, and blue to honor the troops overseas. Throughout the 1950s, Coke would hit the TV screen promoting their image and beverage, whereas Pepsi would now be available to 120 countries and start to target the young, rebellious crowd in the 50s and 60s. As the 60s progressed, Coke would be the first cola company to address the Vietnam War, and Pepsi would merge with the company Frito-Lay Inc. and change the company name to PepsiCo Inc. This merger would increase their stock significantly. Later, they would also introduce their new, more caffeinated cola, Mountain Dew, which is a favorite of mine. Coke countered this move by Pepsi in 1961 by introducing Sprite throughout the country. Coke improved in their advertising to become the first cola company to sponsor the first animated special, Charlie Brown, A Christmas Special. The Cola War really heated up in the 70s and 80s. Coke was the #1 selling cola, while Pepsi was just only #3, just behind Dr. Pepper. Pepsi wanted to be on the same playing field, so Pepsi began to brainstorm ideas that could make them a contender with Coke. Coke at the time was so big, the company would not even refer to Pepsi as Pepsi. they would just call Pepsi the other cola company. Pepsi decided to make a bold move that would change the race. This would be the Pepsi Challenge.
This is the taste. This is the taste. This is the test. Pepsi versus Coke. The Pepsi Challenge. And all across America, more people pick Pepsi time after time after time. Pepsi Coke. All the time, it's gonna be Pepsi now. The team taste is Pepsi. It's gonna be Pepsi now. Taste the Pepsi gives it. Gonna be Pepsi now.
As you can see in the video, Pepsi would take both colas and have a blind taste test with their so-called volunteer. Volunteers would usually be Coke drinkers and would prefer Pepsi because there's more sugar in the drink. On a sit basis, the average Americans would pick Pepsi because it was sweeter. Back in the 70s, no company ever really claimed itself to be the best company and brag. That is exactly what Pepsi did in order to contend with Coke by using their Pepsi Challenge commercials. Coke and Shock knew they had to fire back. Coke in response made their own commercials with celebrities. One of these commercials would be Bill Cosby spying on a fake Pepsi Challenge commercial stating Pepsi does not show the people who prefer Coke on their commercials. Therefore, trying to prove that Pepsi is not the better cola, Bill Cosby would end the commercial saying the famous slogan, "Coke is it." Today I thought it'd be fun if I did my own Pepsi Challenge by calling up Mia Kayaffa to try the Pepsi Challenge, and we can see which soda she prefers, or if she confuses the two sodas with each other. Mia said she prefers Coke, but she also said she doesn't really taste the difference. She can't taste the difference. So, Mia, your instructions are to taste both sodas like they do in the commercial. Which tastes better? The left one? That's Pepsi. Originally in the 70s, 18% of soda drinkers drank Coke, and it went all the way down to 4% due to the Pepsi Challenge. So, Pepsi knew exactly what they were doing. Pepsi's new goal was to take over the supermarkets and fast food restaurants as the new top cola. The first step was to take the supermarket and the rest would follow. Eventually, Pepsi would surpass Coke sales in the supermarkets. Pepsi was beginning to threaten Coke, would eventually pass Coke in Pakistan, taking 62% of the cola shares over there. In the early 80s, Woodruff passed the baton to Robert Gazito, who would choose Don Keogh as his president. These two worked strongly together and in 1982 would make a bold move to introduce Diet Coke. They needed Diet Coke to work if Coke was to stay as the #1 cola. After the launch of Diet Coke, it became such a huge success that it became the third best soft drink to be sold in America. This helped Coke stay as the #1 company for consumer products in the country and let Coke ride as #1 for free for the next 3 years. Eventually, Roger Enrico became the CEO of PepsiCo. He was known as the Cola Warrior because of his tendency to take risks. Roger Enrico would take a big risk one day by doing a sponsorship with Michael Jackson for $5 million. This amount of money would bring the spotlight back to Pepsi. Eventually, Pepsi would shoot the commercials. While shooting one of many commercials, Michael Jackson's hair caught on fire due to the special effects explosives, which would bring Pepsi even more spotlight because they almost killed one of the biggest stars. MTV was one of the biggest channels in the 80s and was especially favored by the younger generation. MTV caught news of Michael Jackson's commercials with Pepsi and would play the ads for free. Pepsi's partnership with Michael Jackson would shake the whole industry, pushing Coke's lead to under 5%. Pepsi would move on to partner with even more stars like Michael J. Fox, Tina Turner, David Bowie, Glenn Frey, and Madonna. Using all these stars would help Pepsi target the younger generation, therefore using the slogan for all their ads that Pepsi was for the new generation. Coke, on the other hand, decided not to upset their older consumers and would stick to their iconic image as being a family-style cola. Coke would also partner with Hollywood in many movies to promote their cola. For example, some movies were E.T., Superman 2, and Breakfast Club. Roger Enrico noticed the amount of Coke in movies, so Pepsi started to promote their cola in movies, but would not catch attention for it until they hit a big breakthrough with Back to the Future. In 1984, Coke wanted something big that would win them the Cola War. Coke hired Sergio Zeman as the VP of Marketing at Coke, who had first started at Pepsi. Because of the Pepsi Challenge, Pepsi would always win on a sit basis because of the sweeter taste, as you saw with Mia. Surgeons even called a meeting thinking that they should tweak the formula in Coke in order to compete in the marketplace. In April of 1985, Coke announced a new Coke, which I bet among everybody in this room that is not a student will remember this. The news of changing the formula did not make consumers happy. Pepsi's marketing saw this as an absolute win and started to attack New Coke in many commercials, which convinced people to switch. People began to protest New Coke by taking the new cola and pouring it out onto the streets and even boycott all Coke products across the nation. Coke sales were now beginning to dramatically drop by 10% in the States. Coca-Cola tried to stay with the new Coke for over 2 months, thinking all the outrage would blow over, but with Coke sales continuing to fall, Coke brought the old Coke formula back by calling it Classic Coke on July of 1985. Coke had a comeback by outselling New Coke 10-1 in 1 year. People began to come back to Coke, and because of New Coke, they put Coke back on top, because everybody was talking about the old Coke being revived. After the old Coke formula was back, the heat of battle in the 80s slowed down. Neither company attacked each other after the 80s, but Coke and Pepsi rivalry has lasted to this day. So, who won? Doesn't matter, it's really just an opinion. But I remain convinced that Coke is better than Pepsi, not truly because it has ranked #1 year after year, but because, let's face it, things go better with Coke. Thank you.